How many of you all saw on KFES 12 at 10 o'clock some time ago about people in the area, a feature they call Everyone's Got a Story? And we have with us today Mr. Jay Hansmann. And Jay was one of the featured people in the program, and he runs a winery over in Marquand, Missouri by the name of Durso Hills Winery. And it's a great place to go. I think we've been way too serious today, so let's uncork the bubbly and try out some of his work. Jay's got a long history in the winemaking business. He's worked 7 years for Crown, and he's also worked for Weingarten Winery before he started his own venture out at Durso here 3.5 years ago. But if you've ever been, which I took Mr. Kennard and we took Tim Weatherly out with us here a few weeks ago, and we're actually going to feature Jay's wines this year at our special event, our meal for the major sponsors for the golf event. So it's he does a great job. He has great wine at the winery. They have excellent food. They've got a great location. I don't know how many people make it to Marquand. You know, I really hadn't gone to Marquand much before some of my friends got me going out to the winery, but it's 37 miles exactly from Jackson, Missouri. And like I say, it's a great place to go spend a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. And we're going to have Jay come on up and tell us all about the winemaking business and also running a winery here in southeast Missouri. Let's give him a warm welcome.
How many people here has been to Marquand, Missouri? Well, great. I'm going to give you a little history of how I've come to where I'm at right now. Back about 14 years ago, I decided I was kind of interested in the grape growing business. So Crown Valley was starting to, Joe Scott had decided that he was going to put in a vineyard and build a winery in Kaufman, Missouri. And at the time, I went up and applied for a job there, and they hired me, and soon I became their head grower. And when I left there, they had about 167 acres of vineyard, about 3 acres of greenhouse operation, and then we had flower operation. And if anybody knows Joe Scott, the more I was there, the more stuff that he piled on me. So we ended up having an orchard, and at the time I learned a lot about growing grapes, which I had a background in agriculture anyway. And then I had a chance to work with Philip Degazi, which was a French winemaker from Bordeaux, France. So I kind of picked up some knowledge and working on the field. And then about 5 years ago, there was another winery that was going in at Weingarten, Missouri. And the guy had a vision. He was going to build a 25,000 square foot building, and he wanted someone to help develop his wine program and his vineyard. So I went to work there, and then about a year ago I quit working there full time, but I do still consult for him. He just presently hired a winemaker. But we won a couple gold medals while I was there, so we were real happy with the progress there. And then about 3.5 years ago, I live in Marquand. My wife is from Marquand. I'm originally from Fredericktown. There was a little winery there called Durso Hills. And Ron Durso had started it in 2000, and he was producing about 300 or 400 gallons, and he had a few locations where he sold his wine, and he had his winery in a little house. So at the time, we purchased the winery from him, and I purchased the winemaking facility first, and we started making wine it was like in the middle of the year and just about harvest. So then I took over the retail part after the first of the year, and we decided that what we would do is we moved into a little restaurant building in Marquand. If you've been to Marquand, there's a building in the middle of town that looks like the old Buckhorn store. It was built a few years ago. We moved into that business and put in a little bistro, thinking it would help me sell wine. Well, we were there for 9 months, and then we quickly saw that the food was drawing the people in. So then I had a chance to move into the Holman building, which was the old home in Mercantile. It's a big 2-story brick building. You can't miss it. It's the only one in the middle of town. So we took over that building and put in our bistro. And we've been in that building now for almost 3 years. And business is on right now we're drawing between 300 to 400 people a weekend, and we're hoping to draw more this summer. It's grown so fast, it's been kind of hard for us to keep pace with everything that's happening. I have a vineyard in the middle of Marquand. It's on the hill. There's about 4 acres of vineyard up there. There was a buckeye building on top, and I completely revitalized it. I've been working in a garage, basically making wine, and you go in the garage and it's like, I got like 4,000 gallons of wine in there. You can't hardly move around. So we're going to be moving into there the next couple of weeks. We have 21 different wines, from Norton's to sweet wines. We do fruit wines. Right now we have peach and blackberry wines bottled. I have pineapple, blueberry, pear, and apple wine we're getting ready to introduce, along with some Moscato wines. So we have about 10 more we're going to introduce. And then we're going to, in the facility that we just built, we're going to start brewing our own beer too. So our ultimate goal is to give tastings of beer and wine at our place. And I have 25 acres on the hill, and we're going to put in a facility where we can do 200 or 300 people, where we can do bigger events. And that's kind of the structure of it. On top of upstairs is Home and Hall, which is where we do lots of, the Marquand Development Corporation is a corporation in Marquand that's in the development of improving Marquand. What they do is they buy a house at the time, and they refix the house to get working families into Marquand, and they've been there for about 12 years, and they've done several homes, and their goal is to rebuild Marquand a house at a time. But anyway, they own the building that I'm in, and I have a long-term lease with them, but they run a hall upstairs, and we rent the hall. We have shows. We do piano wars. We just had a piano show a couple weeks ago. It holds about 100 people. We usually sell out well in advance of the time of the show. We've had cabaret shows up there. We've had murder mysteries, and we usually have a meal with the show. So, and then just recently, the railroad, if anybody remembers, the railroad used to run through Marquand, and there's 3 property owners that are south of me, and it runs along the Castor River. They have cleared off about 6 miles over to County Road 308, and we're going to start giving tours on wagons. And we're going to go like up on the hill where I have the vineyard and the winemaking facility, and then we're going to take the tours out along the Castor River, and we're going to end up over at Castor River Ranch, which is a new resort that's just right outside Marquand. He has RV hookups, and the Castor River is beautiful, beautiful through there. They do kayak rides there, and it's a couple years ago they rated it the cleanest river in the state of Missouri. So anyway, I do everything from pruning grapes. There's no downtime in my job at all, because in the wintertime you're pruning, making wine. Wine needs lots of attention. And then in the summertime you're growing grapes, and believe me, everything in the world that could go wrong goes wrong in Missouri, because Missouri is not the ideal location to grow grapes, because the summers are too wet, and wet, when it rains it causes funguses, so you got to continuously pay attention to the grape growing. And then insects is a problem, and it's just, you know, the University of Missouri has a spray program. It's something that you can kind of guide and go by, but you've got to kind of emphasize throughout the year because you just never know. There's always something coming up. So, and then we have the problem here where it goes from 20 degrees to 60 degrees, from 60 degrees to 20 degrees, which is not good either. So it's kind of a structure. It's kind of a struggle, but we mainly grow French hybrid grapes. And if anybody knows the history of grapes, the French hybrids in France are called American hybrids. Basically what happened was in the late 1800s, this little insect that's in the United States, which our grapes are immune to, called phylloxera, got transported somehow into the vineyards of France. And what happened was they attacked the vinifera grapes, which is the family of Caberets, Riesling, and all of them grapes. They attacked them and destroyed about 80% of the vineyards in France, Italy, and all over Europe. And what happened was that the German settlers in Hansmann, Missouri, figured out what the problem was. So they started shipping wild rootstock that was tolerant of phylloxera into Europe, and the Europeans started grafting on top of this rootstock from Hansmann, and then they started cross-pollinating and coming up with new varieties. And some of these varieties, if you've been to wineries, they're like, I brought a bottle of Sauvignon, it's a French hybrid, Chardonnay is a French hybrid, Chamberson, Fronten, you know, just on and on and on. They developed these in France, and then of course they came back over here, and we found that those grapes grow very well here in the Midwest. So, and then we have the Norton grape, which was developed, which is the Missouri State grape, which was developed in Virginia in the early 1800s, and now it's a very popular wine. We sell lots of Norton in my facility, and I kind of specialize in Norton. And all my gold medals that I've won in the last 3 or 4 years have been in Norton, making Norton and Norton Rosé wines. Now our restaurant, we're open from Thursday through Sunday. On Friday nights is our prime rib night. We usually draw over 100 people on Friday nights, and then Saturday we do catfish, shrimp, and we have New York strip. We have a full menu, other things on there. And then Sunday afternoons we do fried chicken and New York strip and hamburgers and so forth and so on. So, and then Thursdays, chicken wings, New York strip, it's kind of our main things. But we keep pretty busy at the restaurant, do a lot of wine tastings, and we just draw people from, it's just almost unbelievable that in Marquand, Missouri, when I told my wife I wanted to do this, she kind of thought I was crazy, but I kind of thought that maybe we could get people to come to Marquand, and we've been fortunate, and so we've been doing really better than what we had thought. We don't sell our wines anywhere else. Mr. Durso had about 24 or 25 locations, but when I started, it was just like more of a hassle than what it was worth to me. I had a whole different direction I was wanting to go, so I just exclusively sell my wines at the winery. Maybe someday down the road. I've got 3 kids, but none of them want to be in the wine business, so, so anyway. That's kind of where I'm at with that. So, but we've been real successful doing what we're doing, and I think we'll continue. We do about 4,000 gallons this year. I kind of think that next year we're going to bump it up to 5,000 gallons of wine. So, and then I have other people now growing for me. I'm contracting local farmers, and everybody's kind of getting a little excited about it. local people are growing an acre here, 2 acres there, and going to grow grapes for me. So, and I tell them, hey, if you grow this, I'll contract with you. If you grow the grape that I want you to grow. So it's kind of helped the local economy. Also have, we're also doing some, I'm going to be taking a trip to Scotland. I happen to know a stockbroker in London whose mom and dad just happens to live outside of Marquand, go figure. You know, it just amazes me every time I meet somebody new that has a little place outside Marquand. It just amazes me of the profession and all the people they know, and it's just unbelievable. You know, you kind of know a community, but yet you don't really know a community of the people in it. But I've met a lot of people, and we're going to venture off into the whiskey making down the road too. So what the whole, and since I've been in business, we have 2 bed and breakfasts now. We have a little art museum, an art show place in Marquand. The park has been redone. There's a log cabin. There's been 2 resorts go in along the Castor River. So everybody in Marquand's kind of excited about, we're wanting to make Marquand a destination. And the whole thing is that we want people to come to Marquand and be able to spend all day and have something to do. And then they can come spend all weekend at Marquand. So that's kind of the goal, and every, you know, it seems like every few months another little piece of the puzzle comes together, but we're real happy to be in Marquand. And does anybody have any questions?
You mentioned that you started contracting with some local farmers. About how much of your production, you said 4,000 gallons, are you growing all of those grapes?
I'm growing all that now. In fact, that's why I had to quit wine. I was winemaking for 2 other wineries, and I ended up having to give that up because it's just, I just don't have no time anymore. So that's why I went to the consulting end. And that's kind of why I'm wanting to get growers to grow them, because that frees up a lot of time. I mean, I can run out there and tell them what they need to do, and then they can grow the grapes, and then my time is better, you know, funneling it that way. So.
How many employees do you have?
Well, I have right now about a dozen employees.
And you contract out with a lot of
Yeah. I've got right now, I have 3 farmers that are growing grapes for me. And then Dr. DeMonte, if anybody knows him in Farmington, he has a small vineyard and a fruit orchard. I just took over the management of it, but I have a couple of guys that work up there for me too, because we sell a lot of fruit wines.
Hey Jay, could you tell us kind of what the process and time frame from growing a grape to what you got to do to make it into wine?
Yeah. The process starts when you start pruning a grape. Grapes are usually 3 years old when they start producing real well. You prune the 1-year-old wood. When I prune, I'm thinking 2 years down the road, where I want these vines to be producing 2 years. So like I'm pruning now, I know how many, every time I prune a vine, I can tell you within 3 or 4 bunches of grapes how many grapes are going to be on that vine. So that's kind of, you know, so each vine you kind of judge differently, because each vine is kind of its own little individual. By the stuff that when you prune the vine, you kind of go by how many pounds you take off of it, and that's how many buds you leave. Like basically you leave 30 or 40 buds on a vine, and for every pound of clippings that you clip off it, you can add 15 to 20 more buds. I mean, yeah, 20 more buds. So, so you can you kind of judge your vines. Well, anyway, you grow your grapes, which takes, you know, usually we harvest them in the fall, and then at that time, the grapes are pressed and they're fermented, and then in December I usually rack them, which racking is you take them off the lees, which is the dead yeast that falls on the bottom, and all the other solids that that fall to the bottom of the grapes. So then your red wines, I usually let them set like a Norton. Most Nortons, I don't even think about bottling for 3 years. So what I do is the first 6 or 7 months, I get the wine ready, and then I'll barrel the Norton wine into oak barrels from, I've been using oak barrels from Cuba, Missouri oak. And I'll oak them, put them in the oak, and then about a year later, I'll keep testing them. Oxygen is the worst enemy that you fight in the wine business. So you got to keep oxygen absolutely out of the wine, because oxygen is what ruins wine. So you're all the time testing to see how much sulfur you have in wine. And when people tell you that they're going to be growing organic wines, it's kind of a real difficult thing, because if you don't have any sulfur in this wine to keep the oxygen out, it's going to go bad quickly. Now I don't, usually the legal limit is pretty high, but the United States Food and Drug Administration has, but I usually don't put no more than, I kind of judge by the pH, because the pH of your reds is around 3.5, whereas your whites are around 3.1, 3.2. So the lower the pH, the less sulfur you have to have in the wines. So that's kind of how that goes. White wines, you can usually bottle them in 6 months to 9 months. You can kind of hurry them along if you need to. I don't get in any hurry, because I just usually bottle wine when I run out of something. So, but anyway, the process, I'd say it takes about a year. Fruit wines are a little quicker. I've already bottled some blackberry that's from last year's harvest. My Nortons are still sitting in the tanks, getting ready to barrel, and then I have some 2011 Norton I'm kind of thinking about maybe bottling. So that's kind of how that process goes. Where the beer making is such a better deal is because you can have a batch of beer in 3 or 4 weeks. Wine takes a little bit longer.
Tell them your pineapple story, Jay,
Oh.
because my wife, Judy, she's so anxious to get Jay to bottle this pineapple
Yeah.
wine so she can taste it. But it's a real interesting story how Jay came to make pineapple wine.
Does anybody has a brother-in-law that just bugs you to death all the time? All right. Well, I've got this brother-in-law that he wanted to start making wine. So he makes onion wine, beef wine, all kinds of crazy stuff. And all the time he's calling me saying, you know, asking me questions. And I mean, they're never easy to answer. And then I've got to kind of make him understand. So it's just every time I get a call from him, it's like an hour conversation or two. But anyway, sometimes this brother-in-law comes in pretty good. Last summer, he called me and he says, "Hey, you ever made pineapple wine?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Hey, I know where there's a bunch of pineapples." I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, and they're cheap." And I said, "How cheap?" And he said, $2 a case. And I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "How many is there?" And he said, "About 50 cases. So he says, "I'll bring you over one of them." So they were overripe pineapples that were so overripe that when I cut into it, the core was sweet. And they had been slightly frozen, so they were unsellable, but they were perfect to make wine out of. So my help at the restaurant, they don't like me when I bring in a bunch of fruit, but we were cutting up pineapples one weekend, and I thought, well, I'm going to make pineapple wine. So I bought all the pineapples, which didn't cost, I don't have hardly anything in it. But it's making pretty good wine. I'm getting ready to bottle it. It's going to be really good. I got the alcohol content around 12.5%, 13%, and it tastes like pineapples. That's the whole thing about making wine, is getting the wine to taste the way you want it to taste. And that's part of the challenge, you know, especially with blackberry and peach, getting that flavor to come out. But the pineapple wine is going to be pretty good.
What's the best way to keep a bottle of red after you've opened it, if you don't want to drink it all at one night?
Well,
Sorry, I apologize. I realize you drunks, that's never a problem.
the problem with reds, and especially your better red wines, is when you open it and you start drinking it, it starts taking in oxygen, which is good for the first few hours a day. But oxygen is going to be your enemy. The best thing I have found is you can throw it in the refrigerator. That will, any of your wines that you open, put them in the refrigerator, and if you want to drink the red wine at room temperature, just take it out a couple, 3 hours before you drink it and let it sit on there. Refrigeration, colder temperatures kind of help keep it a little bit fresher. But you need to be drinking it in 3 or 4 days.
So would you write me a note to tell my wife that it's okay if I drink the entire bottle in one night? Professional opinion?
Yeah.
As long as it's his wine, she'll be glad to.
Okay, fine. Deal.
Where do you get your beef for the restaurant? Is that local stuff or?
Yeah, I buy it all from Bullinger Farms. They're in Patton. They have a good product. We buy the best ground, 86% ground beef. I buy all my chunks of prime rib and New York strip, but I buy it all from them. They have good quality, and I like to buy as local as I can. So we bought, since we started opening there, we're real happy with them.
Jay, you ready to uncork a couple bottles
Yeah.
up there, let them sample?
I brought a dry wine, my Norton, the 06 Norton.
Yes.
And then this wine here is really smooth. If you've ever had a Norton, this is probably one of the smoothest Nortons I've ever drank. I've won 2 or 3 bronzes on this wine. I can't figure out why I never won a gold, because I have some wines that I don't think are as good that I won gold medals with. But the problem with contests is you never know who the judges are. And the Missouri contest, they always bring in a different.
Rick, tell them what you think of that Northern wine.
That 06 is good.
And my Vigneault,
Hey Jay, did you bring any St. Vincent's with you?
no, I can't. That's St. Vincent, you got to think about it. My friend Dr. DeMontier, he decided to grow an acre of St. Vincent, which is developed, they kind of found over at Southwest Universities at their experimental thing at Mountain Grove. And it's a wine, when you first open the bottle, it's got this real musky smell to it. And then when you drink it, the first time you drink it, you kind of think, oh, I don't know. Then at the end, you get this real strawberry type thing. Then you set it down there and swirl it, and you drink it again, and then it's like a whole different thing. Isn't that kind of how you? Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to make champagne out of it. I've been experimenting with it, and I think it's going to make some really good champagne.
So what do you do with all the wine when you taste it and you don't like it? If you committed to it, you said, well, I'm going to make champagne.
Donate it to David Ross
Well, so
Foundation.
far that hasn't happened. But a lot of that wine does go into my sangria. We sell about, in the summer I'll sell 12 to 14 gallons of sangria on the weekend. And we use a lot of wine in the sangria. But when I did first buy the winery, Mr. Durso had 300 gallons of Norton that went bad. I did have it, I took it up to Crown and had them distill it, and I used it to make my port. So you can distill the alcohol out of a wine that completely goes bad, and then reuse the alcohol to bring up the alcohol content so you can make port.
I think,
Does anybody want to?
yeah, I think our president's going to go ahead and kind of close the meeting, and then we can sample. Yeah.
Okay.